So Hugh Grant is the kind of guy who makes us feel all warm and cozy inside, right? That is, if you're thinking of him in those 90s rom-coms like Four Weddings and a Funeral. But now he's in his villain era. Today on Commotion, how Hugh Grant is weaponizing his charms in a brand new horror movie. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so like 10 years ago, a little movie called The Babadook kicked off what's often referred to as elevated horror, which is basically like thoughtful, artful horror movies that could just as well be called dramas. Elevated horror, it's a trend that indie powerhouse studio A24 has capitalized on, with films like The Witch and Hereditary and Talk to Me. And now we have Heretic.
I could tell that you are a very spiritually curious person.
I think it is good to be religious, to find your faith in a doctrine you actually believe.
Well, our work here is done.
Now, I will go and check on the pie.
That's a bit of the trailer from Heretic. It stars Hugh Grant as a Colorado man who gets a knock on the door from two young women canvassing for the Church of Jesus Christ in the Latter-day Saints. He welcomes them into his home for a chat and doesn't let them leave. But beyond the horror movie setup, A Heretic, it's a film that is raising interesting conversation about religion. And I've got a couple of religious nuts, basically, here in the house. Teri Hart and Ashley Ray here to unpack it all for us. Hello.
Well, that's a first of an intro.
I mean, we are our own Bible study group, I feel. Last time we were here talking about Conclave, now it's Heretic. But Teri, look, I gave a basic setup for Heretic there. So tell us more about what it's about without giving too much away.
Okay, so Heretic is really kind of like more of a cat and mouse thriller. A lot of the success of the film comes from the fact that for a long time, you don't really exactly know what Hugh Grant's motivation is for not letting these two young girls leave. And you don't really know what's going to happen to them because you pretty much get the vibe right away that he doesn't really want to kill them. And there's something else at play in this movie. And I think that when they start figuring out that they're in trouble, the reveals are really great. Those kind of, nuggets that we get along the way of them understanding that this is a problem with Mr. Reed.
Well, it's interesting because, this movie is obviously being packaged as a horror movie, but, I mean, you use the phrase cat and mouse thriller. And so, should we even be calling it a horror movie?
Yeah, I think that, certainly for me, who I would self-identify as somebody who's not a horror fan because I don't like gore. I don't like horror for horror's sake. So I kind of, if anybody falls in that same category as I do, this is more of a psychological thriller. There's more traditional horror moments that happen in it a little bit later in the movie. But the first 2/3 of the movie is a real, like I said, a cat and mouse thriller, a psychological thriller. It's shot like a horror movie, like those tracking shots and those zoom ins, but there's no gore to it really. And there's a lot of dialogue. This is a very talky movie and it's super suspenseful. It's from the guys who wrote A Quiet Place. So, it's kind of all vibes.
Mm-hmm. Lots of gamesmanship in the language too, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
and
yeah.
Monopoly.
Yeah, exactly. Ashley, I mean, let's talk about Hugh Grant for a second, because of course this is the guy that was like the king of the 90s rom-com. But it feels like he's been kind of cutting loose lately, being a little more adventurous in his roles. I mean, he's in his villain era. I think that began with Paddington 2. Recently we saw him playing an Oompa Loompa in Wonka. Yeah. But this is probably the creepiest we've ever seen him. So what do you make of his performance here?
Absolutely amazing. He is clearly on demon time. He has figured out how to get that just eerie twist when he needs it of, I'm not charming anymore, I'm terrifying. And I think it's the sort of role that only someone like Hugh Grant could play, because the premise of this is two girls who have never in their life encountered a true crime documentary. Any other girl, like any other person, they're going to walk to this house, immediately see any other guy who doesn't look like Hugh Grant and be like, I'm out of here. Hugh Grant, he's able to kind of be like, oh, I'm so charming. Oh my goodness, ladies, come in, I have pie. And then it slowly starts to unveil itself. And you're sort of, as a viewer, asked, do you believe in this man or do you not believe in him? And I think if you do, then it does kind of have some more horror elements because you're wondering, okay, maybe this guy isn't so awful and he just really loves religion. But if you kind of walk through it going, no, he immediately put on serial killer glasses, ladies, like come on. As I was screaming, it does feel a little bit more of this cat and mouse thing of like women, like, wake up, like, come on. He is pointing out all of these ways that you have been controlled and subjugated. Let's start putting it together. So I loved the more cat and mouse psychological thriller aspects. I can't say I was afraid of the horror, but you really, really get pulled into Hugh Grant's performance and just kind of want to see what he's going to do.
Mm-hmm. My big takeaway from that is I need to take you bifocal shopping if I ever need to, so I know I don't ever buy serial killer glasses.
He puts them like immediately. It's like, did you just get those from like John, a serial killer? I can't think of the name of one, but.
Look, Teri, let's dig in a little for a second here, because this is a movie where you got two women. They're playing missionaries. The two women playing missionaries in the film, Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. They actually both grew up in Latter-day Saints families, and they've talked about having some hesitation about this because of the way they were wary about how missionaries might be depicted in film. But the script ultimately drew them in. So how do you think that their shared history impacts their performances?
Firstly, I just want to say, like, serial killer glasses, I give the serial killer outfit, like, it's the cardigan for me. It was the cardigan that gave him away for me. But so everybody is talking about Hugh Grant in Heretic, and deservedly so. He's great. But I think, hot take, I think he can only be as good as he is because the girls are so good.
Yes.
They are handing him this in a silver platter or a pie plate, if we can. And what they have to pull off to make this completely believable is the absolute innocence within their faith. You don't question for a second why they're doing what they're doing. So, those, the memes, the things, don't go in the basement. It's always you don't feel that with these two girls, Sister Paxton and Sister Barnes, because they are so entrenched in their faith of Mormonism, and you don't question that their mission is the most important aspect of their life. And that's what makes the movie work so well, is you believe why they've done this and the situation that they find themselves in as a complete truism around their faith of being Mormons. And that is what allows the entire device of them going into this house and believing Hugh Grant. They ask all the right questions. They do everything that their mission has taught them to do. Is there a woman in the house? All the things. And he just sells them on it, and they are going with their belief in God and faith.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, rightfully, like, praising Sophie Thatcher, Chloe East, is that their names? Yeah, it takes a lot to go toe to toe with Hugh Grant, and the fact that they hold their own. Like, I mean, sorry, Timothée Chalamet, you didn't do it. These two did.
No, but when they have to react to him, when one or either of them turns their head, and there's all kinds of things. When people see this movie, they'll know what I'm talking about. And the camera is looking at them. They are delivering that emotional turn. Hugh Grant is actually kind of one note throughout. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who have to do the emotional arc of the change, of figuring out the situation that they're in and what they're going to do about it.
Yeah. And I would say they're the ones who have to sell us on sort of the ending of the movie and how it works, because really Hugh Grant sort of, and I'm not going to reveal anything, but his thesis and everything is maybe something a 13-year-old would figure out watching a South Park episode. So, does it really work? Is they're being convinced of it and disbelief of it. That's what really drives the film.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Now, Teri, one thing, the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, they shared some criticism about this film. They said it promotes, and I'm quoting, violence against women because of their faith. And they also say it undermines the contributions of volunteers, the people who go door to door, adding that it would threaten their safety. So how does the film's portrayal of the church strike you?
So, given the film's premise of missionaries going door to door, they really had very limited options of what religious sect they were going to use. Like it's Mormons or it's Jehovah's Witness. I think there's a couple of others, but those are the most obvious two religious sects that they would be able to use for this device. And at the beginning, there are some questions brought up about Joseph Smith, who was the creator of Mormonism, and what his motivations were about creating this religion. But the movie is really questioning all beliefs and all organized religion. The second act of the movie is where things really get interesting about this debate about iterations and belief. And that's where I was really leaning into this script to see exactly how nuanced the script was and how they were going to play this out through the third act. So I really do think that Heretic is going, yes, they use Mormonism for the device of the movie, but it's going beyond that religion and really talking about organized religion writ large.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, look, Ashley, I mean, you kind of already took a jab at this movie with that South Park comparison, the 13-year-old religious thesis. But but talk to me, like, does this only work as a fun thriller, or do you think it's landing a bigger statement on organized religion?
I think it does land a bigger statement on organized religion. I do think most people who go see this will go, that is very different for a horror movie. This isn't something that I've seen so blatantly that a film just sort of takes apart religion and why people use religion in a way that is smart, but at the same time, if you are someone who has had even a passing interest in theology, you've probably run into this, and it's a little like, really, like, Mr. Reed, that it took all of that for you to figure that out. Like, you could have just watched the movie Dogma. It's in it. Like, that's just kind of like, yeah, we all know that's the point. And I don't want to spoil what his big reveal is, but it does kind of give you a like, well, duh, man. So that's where the film as a bigger statement on organized religion, it kind of falls flat for me. I wanted a bit more from that third act of them condemning religion or its specific treatment of women instead of this just sort of, well, people need religion because they need order in their life. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so as a fun thriller, I think it's a lot better, particularly, with this ending it gives us where we're a little unsure of where we even are in reality. So I think just embracing that part of it really made me enjoy it more as a movie versus, going out and telling my friends, this is going to change everything you know about religion. It's not going to do that.
Yeah, I feel like I've had these conversations at Thanksgiving. But, here's the thing, though. Staying on this, having conversations about religion, like, this is not the only movie this year having these conversations about religion. Like, we all talked about Conclave earlier this month, I think, or just a few weeks ago. Looking back at some of the other movies this year, like in terms of movies, even horror movies tackling the religious patriarchy, like we had Immaculate and The First Omen. Teri, what do you make of Hollywood taking on religion in this way, especially when you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have like kind of the faith-based stuff, the TV shows and the films like The Chosen, that's drawing in a huge audience?
Well, it really speaks to how divisive the world is, right? This isn't the first time that we've seen genre movies lean into the tenets of religion. The thing about religion is whether we practice religion or not, we all have a basic understanding of Christianity. So there is a shortcut for filmmakers in terms of the binary of the good and the bad, which the Bible sets up for us. And so I think that is, it allows for very little exposition, especially, you think about Heretic, they just jump right to it, right? They have an understanding that the people watching this movie know what they're talking about. And they're right, we do. But in terms of Hollywood talking about, religion in this way and in this binary way, I do think we're divided. I also think that, the idea of going to church as a casual thing for a family, like sometimes you go and sometimes you don't. Even they say this in Heretic, like being religious isn't popular anymore. It's in the first act of Heretic. They recognize how religion has changed its place in people's and families' lives. It's a binary thing. You either are or you aren't, which didn't used to be the case. Certainly not in my lifetime. When I was a kid, it's like sometimes you went and sometimes you didn't, whatever faith you practiced. So I think that is something that is speaking to, again, the divisive nature that we find ourselves in this time in the world. And we're seeing it in entertainment between something like the incredible success of The Chosen with the faith community and, other things like Heretic, which are questioning faith and questioning organized religion as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I have 30 seconds left, but I wanted to come to you. Like, what are you making of this polarity and how Hollywood's tackling religion? But also, where'd you land on the movie ultimately?
I mean, I liked it. I do think that it's one I'd revisit for the Halloween season. I don't know that it'll become that cult classic, but I do think among Hugh Grant performances, this will be one people go, you have to go see it. It's so different from him. I think that's sort of the bigger pull than the religious messaging. But that alone is enough to make it really, really fun to watch. It is an entertaining thriller.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here. This was, I mean, I got more out of the movie from you two. Heretic is in theaters now. Teri Hart is an entertainment reporter with Super Channel in Toronto. Ashley Ray is a comedian, actor, and host of the podcast TV I Say. She's in Los Angeles. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so I just started watching Somebody Somewhere on HBO. Okay, this is a show that stars Bridget Everett. She's a comedian and cabaret singer, and it's set in her hometown, Manhattan, Kansas, which is known as the Little Apple. The series is a love letter to the small towns of the world. It could be called a drama because it begins in the aftermath of a death. But it's also a heartfelt comedy about finding family in your 40s. And it's now in its third and final season. And to talk about Somebody Somewhere, Sarah-Tai Black is here. Hi, Sarah-Tai.
Hi.
Hello. I should also say Sarah-Tai has thoughts on Heretic. So if you want to read their thoughts on Heretic, go to their Globe and Mail review. So Sarah-Tai, but we're here to talk about Somebody Somewhere. So like I said, I just started watching this show, and it already feels so unique. I'm not sure I could find what to compare it to. I mean, I was initially thinking is this like the spawn of mumblecore and nicecore? Not sure if that fits, but how would you describe this show to people who haven't seen it?
Yeah, it definitely has like that mumblecore lineage. The Duplass brothers produced it. They directed a lot of the episodes, particularly like the season finales and premieres. But yeah, I would put it within that kind of mumblecore lineage, and also something like the shows that were coming out in the late 2010s focused around comedians, something like, hate to say it, like Louis, those kind of like slice of life, looking at like the humanity of very everyday situations, maybe like not a fully optimist version of Seinfeld, but something a bit more tender and taking things a bit more seriously, but still really irreverent, and finding just the absurdities in serious things as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like setting the show up, I mean, when we meet Sam in the first episode, she's grieving the death of her sister, and she's feeling isolated in her hometown as a single woman in her 40s. But then she meets Joel. So could you tell us more about their friendship?
Yeah, I think that the beginnings of their friendship especially will be familiar for anyone who's like from a small town. They actually went to high school together, but Sam had kind of never really seen Joel for who he was, and it's not until she's in this moment of grief and kind of going to her dead-end job where he also works that she sees him seeing her, and it's kind of like this moment of this person who was previously a kid really looking up to her and being like, you know who I am, kind of thing. And playing with that dynamic is also how like that first season explores the relationship. Like, how do you find like the equilibrium in a relationship where maybe someone was a little bit underseen in the past and is only now coming to the fore. But it's one of my favorite codependent friendships ever put to screen, I will say. You can tell a lot of like their real life friendship is making it to the page here, so to speak. There's a lot of things that remind me of things that I do with my friends, and just there's an intimacy and a really lovely romance to the friendship, which is like, if people ask me like, why do you want to watch this? Why should I watch this? I'm like, because it's like one of the best examples of platonic romance like we've ever seen on screen, and like not just explored for like a one-off episode. It's kind of like the backbone of the whole series.
So I didn't realize they were real life friends, but now that you say that, it like makes perfect sense. Okay, because they definitely have that vibe. Well, I mean, look, the show isn't a musical as I understand it, but singing does play a big part in a lot of the episodes. So let's listen to an example from this season.
I guess it's just love. say, let's take the sunny side. And then you smile at me, you crack my heart open wide.
So, Sarah-Tai, I have no context for this scene. Talk
You're
to me
gonna
about
make
this scene.
cry. I'm gonna cry. The thing about the show is it's gonna make you cry, but like in the best way, where you're so glad to feel. But yeah, I would say a warning for people who don't like musicals. I don't like musicals except for Jesus Christ Superstar, obviously. This isn't a musical. It's a comedy drama that uses singing and musicality as like a diegetic feature. Everyone is acknowledging there is singing happening, karaoke style, if not, communal gathering style. But this is a really lovely scene between Sam and Joel's boyfriend, who has kind of come into the picture around season 2, and now in season 3 they're navigating like what it means to move in with one another and share space with one another, and also try to like find room for the friendships you had before you found your romantic non-platonic person as well. So it's this really lovely scene where Sam has written this song for Joel's boyfriend to express how he feels about him, and it's something that's really difficult for him. He's a very like, I won't say conservative, but he's a bit like straight-laced, very prim and proper. He's a bit older than Joel. He's from a different queer generation where they didn't have as much freedom to express themselves in the way they wished. But yeah, it's just it's one of the series' numerous beautiful moments where they're using Sam's talent of singing and Bridget Everett's talent of singing to express something beyond what can be expressed in just plain language. I always, I think a lot as someone who has like watched all of the episodes multiple times. It's my comfort show, but not in the way that like Law and Order SVU is my comfort show, where I'm like, what's wrong with me? This is like a really tender human show, and it's very comforting to me. But as someone who was previously aware of Bridget Everett's work as a cabaret singer, for anyone who doesn't know, she has a long storied career as a comedian and cabaret singer, singing these really bawdy, BAWDY, and also body, BODY songs. They're like it's a lot of blue comedy, a lot of physical comedy, and it's incorporated a bit in the show in a really fun way. But then there's also these really tender, sincere moments as well, and it's just the way that it finds the balance between those human moments of, on one end of the spectrum, a little bit horny, and on the other side, like this deep, deep, deep vulnerability is just, I think, the beauty of the show.
Okay, well, look, I really want to ask you this. You kind of mentioned right there, like kind of the generations of queerness in terms of queer representation and how they could feel spoken. I mean, this is also a show about queer people in a small town, like, the stars from, as we mentioned, Manhattan, Kansas, so are the creators. Can you talk to me? We only have 30 seconds left. Can you talk to me about like what do you think of this show's representation of queerness overall?
I love it. I feel like queer people of all kind of marginalized identities, we're a bit exhausted from the representation reductive processes that have been happening in the past like 10 years. And this is a show where there are urgencies, as there are for like all queer folks living their real lives. But there's also just like the ability to see everyday things. For most of us, we don't wake up like, oh, another day facing the homophobia of society. Like, it's something that doesn't need to be a big thing unless it does, purposefully so. But yeah, it's really lovely to see a show that like treats topics like queerness or religion or bodies and fat bodies and things like that with a lot of subtlety and a lot of nuance, and not just like hammering us over the head with things. It's very lived in, it's very real. And I love it. Everyone should watch it. There's no show that I recommend more than this one. If you haven't seen it, like, do yourself a kindness and watch the show.
Do yourself a kindness. I love that note to go out on. Sarah-Tai, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Sarah-Tai is a film critic in Toronto. Their work shows up in the Globe and Mail and right here on Commotion. You can watch Somebody Somewhere right now on Crave and do yourself that kindness. And that's it for the podcast today. Remember, you can listen to any episode of Commotion anytime, wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on YouTube and Instagram. We're at Commotion CBC. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. Have a good one.